Alright, man, peace. So many of you brothers out there know for a fact that I have a series called LeBron James' #1 fan, featuring none other than the superstar sportscaster Shannon Sharpe, who is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, LeBron James' #1 fan on the entire planet Earth. I really think that Shannon Sharpe would give one testicle and one kidney if his boo thing LeBron James needed it. But if there is a close second to Shannon Sharpe in the NBA sports media, it would be none other than Nick Wright, aka Mr. Nick Wrong, who goes even above Shannon in certain criteria when it comes to fanboyism, because Nick Wrong tries to validate LeBron James being the focus of his ardor with stats that normally are compiled with an agenda. Well, this morning, Mr. Brandon Marshall, the former star wide receiver of the Denver Broncos, the Miami Dolphins, the Chicago Bears, the New York Jets, etc., he's pretty much set Nick Wright straight. Brandon Marshall, since he's joined the show, has declared himself a Brooklyn Nets fan, and he's done a very good job putting forth the proper argument for James Harden being this year's MVP award winner. At the very least, James Harden is ahead of LeBron James when it comes to impact. There's no doubt about that, especially pertaining to the effect that he's had on the Brooklyn Nets in steadying the ship. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
He's still offering up his services. All right, time for Nick to break out his updated MVP ladder. Nick.
Jokic has had just one of the most incredible offensive seasons that I've ever seen a center have. He's been incredible. And had another triple-double last night.
Since we last saw it, LeBron's out with that high ankle sprain and Embiid out with a knee injury, so take us through your updated list.
Now, brothers, pay very close attention, because Nick Wrong is going to do something which is basically meant to keep LeBron James' name alive, to try to give him a chance to get healthy enough so that when he comes back, he'll still be considered in contention for the NBA's regular season MVP award. LeBron James' fans are desperate. They know that he needs to win another regular season MVP award so that he can try to keep up with this notion that he's going to catch Michael Jordan as the greatest NBA player of all time. So what Nick Wrong basically does is he says, at least he's going to say in this segment, if the season ended today, this would be my NBA MVP ladder. But the season's not ending today. LeBron James is going to be out for anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. We know that for a fact because of the severity of his injury. So this is just an excuse to once again place LeBron James' name at the top of the MVP ladder when it never should have been there, even when he was healthy. The MVP of this season thus far has been Joel Embiid. Yes, Joel has missed 3 weeks, but hopefully when he comes back, he will pick up from where he left off, and his name will be considered as the #1 option for MVP, because it should be, barring another injury, and barring James Harden and Nikola Jokic stepping it up even further. But because of what Joel does on both offense and defense, he was the MVP leader, and I think that he may be able to pick it up again and hopefully assume that same position.
One caveat again, these are not projected finishes. This is if the season throws today.
Right, but we know once again that LeBron James will be out for at least 4 weeks. So why give a fake projection? Like, why talk about if the season ended today? It's not going to end today.
There we are with the MVP ladder. 9 names on the list, expanded from 8 last time. Start at the bottom. Number 9, Kawhi Leonard. Good stats, good team, but let's be honest, it's been disappointing. And he knows.
Kawhi Leonard is never going to win an NBA regular season MVP award anyway. Let me specify, because we know that he's won Defensive Player of the Year awards. But he's never going to get that offensive award because he's too low-key, and the media does not like him because he does not provide enough fodder for them. And beyond that, he styled himself as an antagonist to their boo thing, LeBron James. So Kawhi would have to average 35 points a game for him to receive serious consideration as the NBA's regular season MVP. He's never going to do it just having a regular Kawhi season of 27 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists.
Which is why he was sounding the alarm last week. Number 8, surging, Luka Doncic.
I agree that Luka is surging.
Since February 1, 43% from 3, averaging 39 and 9 since February 1.
He's been dominant since February 1.
Cavs team that all of a sudden looks like it's itself. James Harden moving up the list as well. Tied a career high with assists last night. James Harden leading the NBA in assists.
James shot terribly last night against the Portland Trail Blazers. but he can do so many things out there on the floor on offense. He's probably the most dynamic weapon in the NBA offensively when it comes to all the things that he can do.
Spectacular for the Brooklyn Nets. What hurts him, of course, is he's played for 2 teams this year, and one of those 2 teams he napalmed on the way out. All right, number 6.
They have to keep bringing up what James Harden did with the Rockets because they view him as the biggest threat to the fictitious and hypothetical LeBron James return from injury, where they're trying to suppose that LeBron is going to be as good or as quote-unquote great as he was before the injury. The media, starting with Nick Wrong, views Harden as the biggest threat.
Guys, number 6 on the MVP ladder, Giannis.
Now look at who he has from 6 to 4. He has Joel Embiid as low as 4 because basically what he's trying to communicate is he wants Joel Embiid to no longer be seriously considered because he knows that Joel was having a better year than LeBron. He has CP3 at 5 and Giannis at 6 because he knows that neither one of those players have an Ice Cube's chance in hell of winning this season's regular season MVP award, especially CP3. Now Giannis, if he somehow can get the Milwaukee Bucks to have the best record in the league, would receive serious consideration. But due to the fact that the media has started to propagate this narrative about him that he comes up short in the playoffs or that he falls short in the playoffs, they're not going to want to give him a 3rd straight regular season MVP. So the chances of Giannis winning are very slim. But that's the reason why he placed both Giannis and CP3 ahead of James Harden, because he knows that they're not real threats.
Giannis's numbers are almost identical to last year, but the defensive numbers aren't as good, the team's record isn't as good, and it's going to be very hard to win 3 straight MVPs.
Keep in mind that the Bucks are surging, though.
Reasons he's 6th. Chris Paul, last night's a great example of Chris Paul. He had 8 points and 9 assists last night, but was a plus 17. His team is excellent, but his counting stats are so pedestrian compared to everyone else. He could fall out of the top 5, but I really do think his...
Fall out of whose top 5? Yours? You have to specify that. You have to say he could fall out of my top 5, not the top 5, because your poll is not official.
He was unquestionably top 5. Joel Embiid. At this point, the games missed has really started to hurt him. He's played...
That's interesting. So the games missed have affected Joel Embiid, but you're going to have LeBron James at the top, who's projected to miss more games than Joel Embiid. Once again, that's the reason why he's concocted this fictitious MVP ladder if the season ended today, quote unquote.
The next fewest on this list is 36. Most of the guys have played close to 40 or more than 40. So Embiid, the reason he's not 1 or 2 is purely because of games missed. Now your top 3. Dame, Jokic, and LeBron. Dame, CJ McCollum's missed 25 games.
Nothing against Dame, but Dame is way too high here. And Dame is having a nice season. But Dame, I'm not even sure if I will put him in the top 9. I would put him somewhere around 10. And to be honest with you, I don't even think that he's having a better season than Steph Curry. At least Dame still has other offensive players on his team that can help him out a little bit. Between Trent and Carmelo Anthony and a couple other guys, Rodney Hood, at least he has other shooters. Stephen Curry has no other shooters on his squad. So it's dangerous to double team Dame. And even though CJ has missed a decent portion of the season, I think he missed something like 15 to 20 games. At least he's played. Steph hasn't had Klay Thompson or any other shooting in that lineup for the entire season. So Dame is way too high. I'm not even sure if I would have him in that top 9. I might swap him out for somebody else, but
Damian Lillard has the Blazers position potentially move into the top 4 in the West. He's averaging 31 and 8 on...
That's Dame's saving grace, is that the Trailblazers have a decent record thus far, but I suspect that they're going to start to lose quite a few games in a row, and it would not surprise me if they finish with a worse record than Luka's Dallas Mavericks.
The Joker, there's a reason he's the Vegas favorite.
The Joker's having the best offensive season in the NBA. And it's not particularly close.
Once again, had another triple-double last night. His numbers this year are out of this world. And with LeBron now going to miss extended time, you know he's going to fall down the list. Why is LeBron still number 1?
Because you're his fanboy. That's why he's still number 1.
because LeBron's actually played as many games or more games than everyone on this list.
Right, but when you make this poll, you have to project the fact that he's going to miss at least the next 4 weeks. So why have him number one other than the fact that you're trying to program people?
Except for the Joker and Dame, and because when LeBron got hurt, they were the second best team in the league record-wise. He was clearly the best player. So the reason there's an asterisk is LeBron's going to fall precipitously down this if we do it in 2 weeks and he's missed a handful more games. But up to this point, he's only missed 3 games on the season. So there's your MVP ladder. I have a feeling, maybe I'm wrong, I have a feeling what Brandon Marshall's going to take issue with. But there it is as we sit here today at the tail end of March.
All right, Nick, so what you said is if the NBA season ended today, this is where it would fall, right? Just want to be clear that we're speaking the same language here. Okay, well, if that's the case, if you're going to have Kawhi on there, you're going to have CP3 on there, then we need to have Kyrie Irving there.
I agree, but we all know that Kyrie's missed way too many games. And to be honest with you, the brother's just way too flaky. Like, he decides to stay home from a West Coast road trip because of a so-called family emergency. And Shaquille O'Neal brought out, yeah, your birthday. You want to celebrate your birthday. That's like, you can't count on Kyrie. He's just too damn flaky.
First. Second, you talk about Embiid. You talk like if the season ended today, Joel Embiid will be the clear-cut MVP.
Absolutely, and it won't be close. Once again, people like Nick Wright and Shannon Sharp, they love to try to put it out there in the atmosphere that LeBron is the best player in the league and LeBron is the MVP, so that when he loses, which they know that he will, they can claim that this right here is another season where he got robbed, quote-unquote, of an MVP that he should have won.
Okay, he's doing something the game hasn't seen. We're talking about how he's shooting from the field, 50%, a little over 50% from the three-point line, over 40% from the free throw line. What is it, 80%? It's ridiculous, and
that's why I was so annoyed with Joel Embiid when he got injured, because he was so reckless with his body, man. You're playing for something this year. You're playing not only for your team's success, but you're playing for your own personal legacy. There are very few players in the history of the NBA who've been able to win a regular season MVP award. What that means is that you had the best season of any player in the NBA that year in the regular season. There have been very few players who've been able to win that award. You cannot just throw your body around looking for highlight dunks all the time.
How he's doing it. This is Akeem Olajuwon. This is KD. This is Shaquille O'Neal, all wrapped up in one.
I'm not quite sure about that combination. Honestly, Embiid reminds me a bit more of a mix between Olajuwon and Patrick Ewing. But I understand what you're trying to say. You know, it's funny. Back 25 years ago when Patrick Ewing used to take 20-foot jump shots, people used to be so upset with him. Fans used to boo him because he was a stretch center back in the 90s. Patrick had range out to 23 feet, 24 feet. But people did not like seeing him take those long jump shots. He would fit in perfectly today.
I said it, and you tried to call me out all week talking about, oh, remember Brandon was saying this, that this dude is the best player on the planet right now. Absolutely. And I'll stand on that table. Joel Embiid, if the season ended today, he'll be the MVP. But the season isn't ending right now.
Thank you, sir.
Nick, and you know exactly who I want to talk about. You just said I got a feeling who Brandon wants to talk about. Who do I want to talk about? Just clear. It's disrespect. You got James Harden at 7. Are you kidding me?
Thank you, sir.
Why is James Harden at 7, Nick?
Because Nick knows that he's a threat. That's why. Now, just as an aside, look at James Harden here. He can barely dunk. You know, that's why I laugh at this nonsense about, you know, when they say that the athletes are better today. James Harden might be the most dynamic offensive weapon in the NBA today, along with Jokic and a few other players, Stephen Curry, so on and so forth. He can barely dunk. Like, I mean, there were guys back in the 80s and 90s who could dominate the game and were, you know, physical specimens. Clyde Drexler, Dominique Wilkins, etc. There have not been any athletes in the NBA since that time period who were, beyond a shadow of a doubt, better athletes than Dominique Wilkins or Clyde Drexler. Not even mentioning Jordan and those type of guys. But just to get back to the point, James is able to dominate the game today, and he's not necessarily an explosive athlete, at least not vertically.
This dude has come in his short career with the Brooklyn Nets, 38 games, that's all.
What I like about James also is that all of his movements are controlled. He can move quickly without being overly explosive, stressing out the tendons in his legs and in his body, which are going to stop him, hopefully anyway, from suffering a catastrophic injury. But when I see him move, he's always under control.
Article on Sporting News, and he's done nothing but break records, franchise records, and do things that we've never really seen before.
That kid Claxton can play for the Nets also. Does a very good job.
From a point guard, this dude is averaging the last 18 games.
That's interesting. I see a Shield of David painted on James Harden's sneaker. I wonder if that's for Saturn or if that's for the scriptures.
16, he's averaging a 25-point triple-double. This is ridiculous, Nick. Jokic is balling right now. He's in the discussion right now. It's they're neck to neck. LeBron James, he's right there, but he's hurt, unfortunately, so he's out of there. He's in the same boat as Joel Embiid.
Thank you, sir. And once again, it shows you how impartial so many of these media members are. They spent the last couple of days trying to figure out how to claim that LeBron James is still in the running for the MVP award, even though the injury that he's suffered is of a greater severity than Joel Embiid. And when Joel Embiid went down, almost uniformly they said, oh well, no MVP for Embiid.
It's coming down to Jokic and this guy right here. But for you to have him at the 7, that's disrespectful.
Agreed.
No better than that, Nick.
So here's the thing. It's not disrespectful because you mentioned he's played 38 games. He's played 38 games this season, but 8 of those were with the Houston Rockets. So he's played 30 for the Brooklyn Nets. And you said Embiid would still be number 1 and Kyrie should be on the list.
Right, but when you're being considered for the NBA's regular season MVP award, they're not going to divvy it up between the two teams that you played for. They're going to consider your entire season. And what the LeBron James fanboys have tried to do is attack James Harden's season based on his first 8 games or so with the Houston Rockets, forgetting that he had a couple of 40-point games with the Houston Rockets. So it's like, why do you keep bringing that up for unless you're just that desperate? We could pick out LeBron James's 8 worst games of the season with the Lakers, and I'm sure that they're probably worse than James Harden's performance with the Houston Rockets in his first 8 games with them. He's had poor games with the Nets. He shot poorly last night. But because the perception is that he's going hard with the Nets, they're not going to criticize it like they were when he was with the Rockets. Either way, he's having a better season overall than LeBron. He's been having it for a while now, and LeBron is not number 1 when it comes to any MVP ladder other than for the fanboys. I would have LeBron ranked probably, somewhere around 7 or 8.
Guys have not played enough. You've got to play more than 75% of the season. Harden, we are just going, you have to. Like that, you can't be a part. Kyrie is gone again after taking a sabbatical in January, which is when Harden really, by the way, that's Kyrie's sabbatical could have been good for the Nets because it allowed Harden to, it maybe facilitated the Harden trade.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They felt the need to go all in for him. Properly. Maybe they'll be happy about it.
No stress dealing with. Yes, I agree with you there.
Absolutely. And so, but I don't even have Kyrie's games played off the top of my head because I didn't think it was possible anyone bring him up for MVP. He's been fantastic when he's played.
He's averaging 25 points.
I think he's averaging more than 25 points. I think it's probably somewhere around 27, but I could be wrong about that. But Kyrie's been exceptional this year when he has played. He's been much better on defense lately, and on offense, as usual, he's exquisite.
Brandon, there's 15 guys averaging 25 points.
Kyrie Irving, honestly, is non-for-real offensively. I've never seen a player like him with seemingly a 10 out of 10 in every situation, half-court set when it comes to offensive maneuvering, other than probably Jordan.
Most of them play regularly.
Okay, well, let's go back to James Harden. What did you keep? The only thing you're holding on to is those 8 games, those couple games he played in Houston.
Because that's all he has. All he has are those 8 games. It's like a political, runoff or something like that. Like they have to hold on to, whatever they can to imply that it should affect James Harden's MVP candidacy negatively, and I'm sure that it will. And we're going to have a realistic conversation about it. But if we're just comparing LeBron and James Harden, Harden has had a better year than LeBron.
Like this dude was still balling out in Houston. He wasn't the James Harden of last year, but he still was doing. That wasn't his fault. That was the team's fault. They lose their coach, they lose their general manager, and that's why he wanted out. So James Harden, for me, Wilds, is the thing that we need to circle, and we need to have a debate. We need to continue this discussion on live TV. We need to continue this discussion in between breaks, because this is absolutely ridiculous.
Well,
get him, Brandon.
And then I will make a case for someone near and dear to your heart. You mentioned it sort of like in passing, but then, like a mighty phoenix rising from the ashes, the mighty Phoenix Suns rise from the ashes. Chris Paul needs to move up so he finishes top 3 in MVP for the following reasons. One,
right, but what does that really mean? He finishes top 3. Let's talk about the people who have a real chance to win. Chris Paul does not have a real chance to win unless he just becomes dominant over the course of the second half of the season and, maybe averages 13, 14 assists per game, and that's not going to happen. So, let's not talk about who has the best chance to finish with the bronze medal.
These guys are only 2 games out of the number 1 seed. And the poor Jazz are struggling 500 in their last 10 games. And look at...
Because honestly, it's a little bit of the Stephen Curry KD dynamic, where the media claimed that when KD came to Golden State, that meant that neither KD nor Steph could win the MVP because they were going to cancel each other out and offset each other. Well, can't the same claim be made for CP3 and Devin Booker? Nobody's talking about Devin Booker as MVP for whatever reason, and he's having a great year. No one's mentioning Donovan Mitchell for whatever reason, and he's averaging over 25 points a game on a team that has the best record in the NBA, but nobody's talking about him. And I partially blame the Utah media because they're not marketing him as the MVP.
Look at their upcoming schedule, Nick. Orlando, Toronto, Charlotte, Atlanta, Chicago, OKC, Houston, and then the Jazz again. Hey, good news, Jazz. You will be in second place by the time you play the Suns. The Suns will be in first place. Reason number 2, historical precedent. And I know every MVP has scored at least 23 points. Except Steve Nash, Suns point guard. There's some historical precedents for it. And Nick, reason number 3. And
I'll say this, though. Back when Steve Nash was winning MVPs, the pace of play was a lot slower. Like, the Suns were leading the league in points per game at like 108 or 110, something like that. That would be middle of the pack today. And the pace that they played at, if they played that same pace today, that would be like bottom 3 in the entire league.
Less of a point, more of a question.
So, of course, what I mean by that is, once you accelerate the pace of play, you have to project Nash's stats out with more possessions. So it's difficult to compare stats, blindly from that era to this era because the pace of play and the style of play is so different today.
The ultimate conundrum. Here's the conundrum. Chris Paul's counting stats, which you mentioned. He's 60th in points. He's 97th in rebounds. Give him a break. 5'11". He's 5th in assists, and his PR is 37. So here's the conundrum, Nick. What if playing winning basketball and making the lowly Phoenix Suns the number...
That was very good defense there because Chris was trying to put him in a blender, and the guy stayed with him.
1 team in the West. The way to make that happen is by not packing the stat sheet.
Correct.
And how are voters supposed to deal with that?
That's right. It's the original Isaiah Thomas problem. Go look at Isaiah Thomas's counting stats. People will think he's not one of the 40 greatest players ever.
40 greatest players. Isaiah Lord Thomas is one of the top 15 greatest players to ever play. The only little man to lead his team to 2 championships ever in the history of the league. Like, that's an insult to call him top 40. He's one of the top 15 greatest players to ever play.
Reality, he's one of the 20 greatest players ever.
Agreed.
In Indiana, he won in Detroit, and he did it without any other superstars because he was the...
Well, I'll say this. Let me say this. Because there's this notion, and Isaiah Lord Thomas tries to promote this also to exalt himself, that he did not have any other great players on his team, and he constantly said the same thing. Oh, when I was standing on the podium at the top 50 greatest NBA players, I was the only guy there without a teammate. Everybody else there had a teammate. Well, let's pump the brakes, because if they did that same poll today, you'd be there with Joe Dumars and Dennis Rodman, and that's a fact. So Isaiah Thomas, even though he's grossly underrated, sometimes he tries to diminish his teammates and the quality of his teammates to try to exalt himself.
Point guard. Chris Paul is the modern version of that. But that's also a reason why Isaiah Thomas never came close to winning a league MVP. Because at the end of the year, there are going to be other guys that also contribute to winning who double him up in some of these counting stats. Listen, I think he's top 5. I thought he was third last year, and people gave me hell for it when he was with OKC. I think he adds as much to your team winning as any player in the league other than LeBron.
I would agree with that. Him and Steph.
This day, but I think the counting stats are going to hurt him so much that it's going to be hard for him to really get in this conversation.
And KD also. Let me throw in KD. Normally, wherever KD goes, it's a guaranteed 50 to 55 wins.
That makes sense.
But I agree with almost everything you just said.
Yeah,
Wilds.
well, listen, Wilds, Nick, I would love to join this conversation about the Suns, but Nick, you and Chris told me, what, a week or two ago that you told me to stop talking about the Suns. That's what I was told on this show.
As a
talking about the
championship
Suns?
contender. Yeah, that's correct. That's
okay,
correct.
all right. I would love to join the conversation, Jenna, but Nick told me we can't talk about the Suns on this show. Sorry.
No,
but
we
great
can't
point,
talk about the
Wilds.
Jazz on this show. We can't talk about the Jazz. We can talk a little bit about the Suns. We can't talk about the Jazz on this show. No Jazz on this list either, Jenna.
What's with the disrespect to the Jazz, though? Like, what did they do to you? Donovan Mitchell should be on this list. He should be on this list ahead of a couple of these guys, honestly.
All right, we're going to have Antoine.
But anyway, that's basically it on that, bros. We'll see how things go. I just found this MVP ladder very interesting.